Let's start working with the hatching tools. But first we need something to hatch. So I want you to draw a block. And I'm working in my standard architectural units as usual. And I want the block to be 3 foot high by 2 foot wide. So I simply enter 3, down arrow and 2. And there's my block. Left click to place it. If you're working in metric, that is a 900 by 600 millimeter block. Let's make a copy. Okay. Next thing to do is start the hatch area tool. Hatch area. And let's take a close look at the options in the tool settings box. First of all, there's the spacing. Right now I have 3 inches set as the spacing for my hatch lines. Angle is 45 degrees, which is pretty standard. Tolerance is 0. Tolerance controls how closely MicroStation draws hatch lines to curved boundaries. If you have a large hatch inside a curved boundary, setting a tolerance value will increase hatch speed. Associative pattern is off at the moment. If it's on, it associates the hatch with the boundary element. And associated hatches are edited if the boundary element is edited. Example, if the boundary is stretched, so is the hatch. Associative region boundary is off because associative pattern is off as well. So if I click associative pattern on, then I have access to the associated region boundary. And you only want that if you had placed a region in the drawing as the hatch boundary. I'll turn that off for the moment. Snappable pattern is on, meaning that I can snap to the hatch lines when they are placed. And search for holes is off. We have no holes inside this block, so this option really doesn't matter. If I did have holes, however, I could choose whether to find holes on the same level as the enclosing element, in this case the block, or to find holes on any level in the drawing, which would be view levels. We'll say no for the moment. Everything is set, and it's just a matter of choosing the appropriate option in the tool settings window. Right now I have element selected as the method to place the hatch, and we'll stay with that for the moment. Since we do have a block element in the drawing, it makes sense to use that. So we need to select the element, and the prompt is saying accept at pattern intersection point. This gives you the option to actually locate where the first of the hatch lines will actually run through. I'm going to snap to this top corner and left click, and my hatch is placed. Now normally I would use a different line weight when hatching. Hatchings are not object lines, so typically you'd want to use a lower weight value for the actual hatch. And in fact I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to undo, going to change to 0 for my hatch, and let's make this now an associative pattern. So the hatch will be associated with the boundary. Try this again. Select the element, data point on the corner as the start point. My hatch is in place. Now we have associative and we have the correct ratio between the object and the hatching. So now, if I move this boundary, then the hatch moves with it. Let's replace that hatch on the second object. Take associated off. Select data point and move the block. The hatch stays where it was. It's not associated with the element. Now again, this may or may not be what you want, although it is very useful to have the hatch take the shape of the edited element rather than having to redo that hatch. Let me undo those actions. Let me give you a little more information about the hatch lines that we can see. Clearly, since you can control the spacing value, it makes sense when, for example, you're designing a deck and you want to see the effects of placing 6-inch planks at different angles and starting point. It's very easy to set suitable values and place several plank layouts in copies of the deck outline. Similarly, if you're hatching a machine part and the material hatching symbol requires that the hatch spacing be 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters, you can control the spacing value so that the hatch will plot at 1/8 of an inch at whatever plot scale you're using. On your own, repeat this hatch placement process, changing the spacing and angle options and data pointing in other locations to locate the start of the hatch. Now let's try the flood method. There's the flood method. Now with the flood method, we have additional options available to you for finding holes. Now again, we don't have holes, and we'll look at this a little later. Flood option, all I need to do now is simply click anywhere inside this block to identify the area to be hatched. But I'm not really able to select where the hatch will start, because if I go to any of the corners, I don't have a snap for the corners. I can circumvent that though if I use a manual snap. So I'm going to go to this corner again and manually snap and accept that. That places my hatch exactly where I want it to be. Try that yourself too. Again, try different options. Try associative pattern on, try snappable pattern off, etc., etc. Now the next thing is to move on to cross-hatching. So I'm going to undo my two actions. Go to the cross-hatch area tool and look at the slight differences that we have in the tool settings window. Since it's a cross-hatch, we have hatching being placed typically at right angles to each other, and MicroStation does this for us automatically. Note the two sets of values here. If the lock symbol is on, then the spacing that we set in the first box is copied to the second box. If lock is off, then we can have different spacing values for each side of the crosshatch. We'll leave that on. Same with the angle. The value you set here is changed by 90 degrees in the opposing box. Tolerance is the same as the single hatch. Everything else is the same. We'll leave everything else as it is. And we will use the element mode. Select the block, find the corner, and data point. And there's our crosshatch. Very simple, very straightforward. Try placing on your own different crosshatches at different angles, different spacings in both cases. Turn off the locks and experiment. Now, of course, there are times when you won't have a specific boundary to work with. And let me do something similar. Just use the line tool. Draw some simple lines. Connect back. Now these are simple lines, so this is not a closed shape. If I try to hatch with the element mode, I can't. It tells me I can't do this because it's not a closed shape. I'm forced to use the flood method. Then it becomes quite straightforward. The flood floods out to find the boundary, accepts the boundary, and works just fine. Now while that's in place, let's just take a quick look at the effect of the graphic group. Now right now graphic group is off, so I can do nothing with this hatch at all because each line is an individual line. So if I select any of the hatch lines, it will be a single line. With graphic group on, however, the hatches, which are automatically a graphic group, can be manipulated, but again, if I select a single line, it will be a single line. But I can copy this if I wish, but I have to use these tools. So, copy tool, click on the hatch, and I can copy the hatch. Try that too. It's not often that you actually want to copy a hatch, except that, of course, a hatch can be trimmed. If you want to use a specific hatch but don't want to recreate it, you can copy it and place it over a smaller enclosing area, then trim the hatch around the edges of the enclosing area.